Every week I hear the same frustration. I spend more time fixing broken processes than actually getting work done. Sound familiar? The truth is, your organization already has the tools to cut repetitive tasks in half. You just might not be using them. Azure Logic Apps isn't just another Microsoft buzzword. It's the glue holding modern workflows together across M365, the Power Platform, and countless other services. Today, I'll prove how a single Logic app can save hours each week by automating the busy work. But first, let's look at why you're drowning in manual steps in the first place. Why manual tasks are holding businesses back. Picture this. You're sitting at your desk with Teams pinging every few minutes, Outlook filling with unread emails, and a SharePoint alert that someone just uploaded a report. At the same time, your manager is waiting for you to approve a purchase request. To keep things moving, you hop between apps, forward documents, send reminders, and chase down who is supposed to respond next. By lunchtime, you've done plenty of switching and checking, but almost no real work. That constant juggling has become the normal rhythm for many knowledge workers, and it's draining. Hybrid work was pitched as the future that would streamline processes and cut down wasted time. But what actually happened in many organizations is the exact opposite. With staff spread across locations and devices, the number of apps and channels we use has ballooned. Instead of eliminating steps, hybrid setups often create more handoffs, more duplications, and more chances for something to fall through the cracks. It feels like we built bigger toolsets only to make everyone's job more complicated. What makes this situation even stranger is the investment. Companies have rolled out Microsoft 365, adopted Teams meetings by default, and taught employees how to co-author in Word or Excel. On the surface, that looks efficient. Yet under the covers, the processes are still stitched together manually. Someone has to remember to route that document for review. Someone else must check the shared folder to see if the right draft is in place. Alerts have to be pasted into chats. Approvals linger in inboxes. All of this effort ends up working against the very tools we paid to improve productivity. Think about something simple like tracking who uploaded a financial report last week. In theory, you should open OneDrive or SharePoint, use version history, and see the details. In practice, most people scroll through long lists of files and recent edits, then send manual emails asking, "Did you upload version 3?" They then copy the link into a team chat to keep everyone informed. By the time the group actually opens the right file, half an hour may have passed. Multiply that across dozens of small steps happening every day, and nobody is surprised when deadlines slip. Research into workplace efficiency shows just how much these tasks add up. Knowledge workers typically spend between 30 and 40% of their week handling repetitive, low-value steps like forwarding emails, consolidating updates, or entering the same numbers into different systems. These aren't difficult skills, they're simply eating away at the hours employees could use for analysis, strategy, or creative work. Paying highly trained staff to copy links and chase approvals is like hiring a chef and asking them to wash dishes full-time. The best analogy I've heard is to think of these workflows like a plumbing system. Every time you add a manual step, you create a tiny leak. One leak may not flood the kitchen right away, but over time, the drips add up to gallons of wasted water. In business, that water is wasted time and focus. The leaks make the system unreliable, and instead of flowing smoothly, tasks get bogged down by friction. When managers talk about moving faster or responding to the market, they're trying to reach speed while still dragging a network of leaky pipes. That mismatch is where frustration builds. We're in a world where quick responses are expected by default. A customer emails and they assume an answer within the hour. Executives want to approve spending in real time. Colleagues expect instant notifications when new documents appear. But when the process for each of those outcomes relies on manual routing, the expectations and the actual system are out of sync. The gap between speed and execution widens with every new workload. Here's the twist. Microsoft didn't ignore this problem. In fact, the solution already exists, built right into the Azure ecosystem. Many professionals log into Azure frequently without realizing it's sitting there ready to connect their day-to-day tools and automate repetitive tasks. They're paying for the licensing and building workloads in Azure, but still missing a piece of the puzzle. That piece is Azure Logic Apps. When set up correctly, Logic Apps can eliminate around 80% of those repetitive workflows we've been talking about, from document routing to notifications to approvals. Instead of copying links manually, a Logic app can detect the upload, send alerts to the right people, and even attach the document directly, all on its own. When you multiply those small wins across teams, the impact is massive. So here's the next big question. If automation is already sitting there in Azure, why doesn't everyone use it? Why is there so much confusion about what a Logic app actually is? And how is it different from tools like Power Automate? Let's clear that up. What Azure Logic Apps actually are. Why did Microsoft build Logic Apps when Power Automate already exists? If you've asked yourself that, you're not alone. A lot of IT pros assume Logic Apps and Power Automate are just two labels for the same tool. Both handle workflows, both let you connect Office apps to outside services, both can automate approvals and notifications. On the surface, that overlap is confusing. You don't want to choose the wrong one and rebuild later. So the natural question is, are Logic Apps redundant or are they designed for something different altogether? The reality is that Microsoft didn't create two versions of the same product. Instead, they targeted different audiences and scenarios. Power Automate sits right inside Microsoft 365 and the Power Platform. It's built with business users in mind, people who want to automate personal tasks like routing an approval or syncing lists between two apps. Logic Apps, though, live in Azure. That placement matters. Anything running inside Azure can leverage the full cloud ecosystem: security, governance, scale, monitoring, and integration with enterprise applications. Where Power Automate is about empowering individuals and teams, Logic Apps are about powering entire organizations across multiple systems. That's why calling them duplicates misses the point. Think of Logic Apps as enterprise-grade workflow automation. Instead of focusing only on Microsoft-first tools like Outlook and SharePoint, they can connect across far more services, both Microsoft and third-party. The design philosophy is integration. Many businesses use SAP for finance, Salesforce for customer data, ServiceNow for IT management, and still maintain custom internal apps. None of those live neatly inside Microsoft 365, but they all need to communicate. Logic Apps act like digital glue, binding those systems together. Rather than writing custom code in every app to handle these connections, you build workflows visually in Azure. That makes integration faster and keeps each system maintainable. A concrete example helps here. Let's say a company receives purchase orders as PDF files in SharePoint. Finance wants those orders pushed into SAP automatically. Sales wants visibility in Salesforce. In Power Automate, you could probably move the file around or send notifications. But with Logic Apps, you can structure the workflow to watch a SharePoint library, extract the data, push it into SAP using an enterprise connector, and then update Salesforce, all in a managed, auditable flow. Every time a new invoice drops in the folder, the Logic app wakes up and runs those steps without manual handoffs. That's the scale Azure designed it for. To understand how these flows work, it helps to know the three building blocks of a Logic app: triggers, actions, and connectors. A trigger is the starting point. It could be a file arriving in OneDrive, an HTTP request from another app, or even a scheduled timer. Actions are the steps that follow. Send an email, create a record in Dynamics, write data to a SQL database. Each action executes after the trigger fires. The connectors are the bridges that allow those triggers and actions to talk with hundreds of apps and services. Think of them as pre-built adapters. You don't need to learn each system's API. You simply pick the connector, authenticate, and start building. Suddenly, the barrier to entry for enterprise-grade integration drops way down. The connectors are what make Logic Apps truly scalable. In most organizations, the biggest blocker to automation is integration. Without connectors, you end up writing custom middleware or scripts that require ongoing maintenance. With Logic Apps, the connectors handle standards like authentication, throttling, and error management. That means your workflows can grow across systems without requiring an army of developers to keep them alive. It's not no-code in the marketing sense. It's actually production-ready no-code that respects the complexity of enterprise systems. Here's the part most people miss. Logic Apps aren't in competition with Power Automate. They're more like the foundation Power Automate sometimes sits on. Many flows users build in Power Automate actually run under the Logic Apps framework behind the scenes. Microsoft simply packaged the same workflow engine in two different ways. One friendly for personal productivity and one engineered for enterprise strength inside Azure. That's why the two look similar but function in different contexts. Once you recognize Logic Apps as the backbone, the confusion fades. The takeaway is this: if you need quick automation for you or your small team, Power Automate is perfect. But if your goal is to connect data across business systems, scale automations for hundreds or thousands of employees, and manage reliability at an enterprise level, Logic Apps are the tool you're looking for. They provide the structure you can trust when personal productivity flows need to evolve into standardized processes integrated with core applications. Now that we understand Logic Apps aren't just redundant, the obvious next step is to ask how you actually build one. What does it look like to spin up a Logic app, configure a trigger, add actions, and see it run? Let's walk through exactly that. How to build your first Logic app. Imagine spinning up an automation in less than 15 minutes that keeps your whole team informed without you lifting a finger. That's the promise of Logic Apps. It isn't about coding a complex system or switching between endless windows. It's about creating one reliable flow that quietly handles tasks you'd normally repeat all week. To show how this works in real life, let's start small but useful. Sending an automatic email whenever someone drops a new file into OneDrive. It's the kind of automation that doesn't sound huge, but once you experience it, you'll wonder how you managed without it. If you've ever tried to manage shared folders, you know the frustration. Someone insists they uploaded the latest draft. You check and it's not there. An hour later, you track down the file, but the rest of the team still doesn't realize it's available. Deadlines slip, confusion spreads, and eventually somebody has to resend the document manually. That entire loop exists because nothing is notifying people at the moment a file appears. Automating that step removes the delay, the chasing, and the constant, "Did you upload it yet?" emails. So let's build the fix together. Step 1 happens in the Azure portal. Log in and create a new Logic App resource. This is the container that holds everything. You'll give it a name, choose the subscription and resource group, set the region, and confirm your plan. The process is about as complex as creating a new storage account or virtual machine. Once you deploy the resource, you'll see the Logic App listed just like any other Azure service you've provisioned. It looks simple, but inside it's powerful. Once your Logic App is live, step 2 is where things get interesting. Open the designer interface. Microsoft gives you a visual editor that feels closer to building with blocks than writing code. The first thing you pick is your trigger, the event that kicks everything off. Search for OneDrive in the connectors library, then select the trigger labeled when a file is created. You'll authenticate with your account so the app knows how to watch your storage. From here, you can even drill into a specific folder so it isn't watching your entire drive but just one project area. That flexibility matters when you start scaling workflows across departments. Step 3 is adding the action. In this example, we want Outlook to send an email the moment a file lands in that folder. Choose Outlook from the list of connectors and then select the action to send an email. You can configure the subject line, recipients, and even pull dynamic content from the file details, like the name of the document or when it was uploaded. The point is that the alert doesn't just say something happened. It provides the right context so the person on the other side has what they need without asking more questions. Step 4 takes the workflow from useful to practical. Left unchecked, you might end up alerting your team every time someone saves a file, even if it's just a test draft. That's where conditions and filters come in. You can set logic that says only send the alert if the file type is Excel or only trigger if it's saved in the finance folder. It's a matter of dragging in a condition card, setting the rule, and deciding what happens if it matches or doesn't. This control keeps automations relevant instead of overwhelming the inbox. The best part is that through every step, there's no traditional coding. You're not writing scripts dealing with API calls or debugging syntax errors. You're working with a drag and drop canvas that turns integration into configuration. But don't confuse simple with limited. These same tools scale up to handle enterprise processes because underneath the designer, the workflows still run on Azure's infrastructure. That means governance, logging, and monitoring are already built in. By the time you click save and run the test, you'll have a fully functioning automation that proves how fast and concrete the benefits of Logic Apps really are. Instead of refreshing folders or sending repeated reminders, the system is aware, the notifications are immediate, and nobody has to remember to do the manual step. That's where the confidence grows. You've seen that a repeatable task was automated in under a quarter of an hour with zero code. And here's the thing, what we just built is the tip of the iceberg. If a single alert flow can make collaboration smoother, imagine what happens when you start chaining actions, pulling in multiple systems, or even extending with AI. The simple file-to-email example is powerful on its own, but scaling beyond that is where automation reshapes entire operations. If you took it further, advanced possibilities. What if your automation didn't just detect files or send emails, but could actually understand content? That's the shift that happens when you connect Logic Apps with AI. Suddenly, your workflows aren't just reactive, they're intelligent. Think of an inbox flooded with customer messages. Instead of forwarding those messages around manually, a Logic App paired with AI Builder could classify each one. Urgent billing questions sent straight to finance, support tickets routed to help desk, and general feedback captured in a database for later review. The flow isn't just delivering notifications, it's making decisions based on meaning. That's when automation begins to look like real augmentation of human work. Up until now, most of us have seen Logic Apps as a way to connect common Microsoft services like OneDrive and Outlook. That foundation is solid, but it only scratches the surface. What makes Logic Apps powerful long-term is their reach into systems far outside the Microsoft ecosystem. They aren't limited to a few connectors. They can integrate with complex enterprise services while still giving you a visual interface rather than code-heavy integration projects. For businesses that operate on hybrid stacks with dozens of different platforms, that reach is not a nice-to-have, it's the difference between fragmented silos and a coherent environment. The challenge is, once you start thinking beyond Microsoft 365, the stakes go up. With larger systems, it's not just about stringing together a few actions. Scalability matters, governance matters, and customization isn't optional because real-world processes rarely map to pre-built templates. You might hit a point where a connector doesn't exist for a niche tool you rely on. In those situations, Logic Apps still let you extend workflows with custom APIs or direct HTTP calls, but that requires forethought about security, authentication, and performance. Without structure, you risk building something fragile instead of a platform you can trust at scale. Let's take a concrete example. Imagine a procurement department that receives vendor price sheets every month. Historically, someone opens each file, verifies the vendor data, and rekeys it into the financial system. That's a repetitive, error-prone job. With advanced Logic Apps, the moment a new file arrives, the flow calls an API to extract the data, runs a check with AI to validate formatting, and then pushes the numbers into the ERP system automatically. If the vendor doesn't follow the usual file template, the app can flag the exception and route it to a human for review. By blending AI, connectors, and custom rules, the flow replaces hours of manual work every cycle. This is only possible because Logic Apps ship with enterprise connectors. Out of the box, you can link to systems like Salesforce for CRM data, SAP for finance, and ServiceNow for IT service management. These aren't lightweight connections. They handle authentication, throttling limits, and auditing so your automations don't collapse the moment you put weight on them. Once these connectors are in play, you aren't just automating within Microsoft, you're bridging entire pillars of the business. That kind of integration is exactly what CIOs look for when they talk about efficiency, because it directly reduces operational cost across departments. One organization put this into practice by automating their data entry across multiple apps. Instead of employees spending hundreds of hours typing figures into different systems, they built a Logic app that ingested the records once, validated them, and distributed the data where it needed to go. CRM, finance, reporting. It wasn't just a time saver. It eliminated duplication errors, improved reporting accuracy, and gave leaders near real-time insight they had never had before. Results like that don't come from simple notifications. They come from connecting systems at a deep level where the automation changes how work flows across the company. But none of this scales without governance. Once you're building flows that touch sensitive data across multiple apps, you can't rely on good intentions alone. Permission architecture becomes critical. Who can create, who can modify, and who can approve production automations. Monitoring also stops being optional. With hundreds of automations running, you need dashboards, alerts, and error handling so you're not blind when something goes wrong. The technology makes it possible, but disciplined governance is what keeps those systems safe and sustainable in production. The twist here is that many professionals stop at surface-level automation. A notification for new files, an email sent on behalf of a queue. That's useful, but it barely scratches the potential. Once you add AI, custom connectors, and governance structure, Logic Apps become something far more powerful. An automation fabric that runs across the entire organization. They don't just save minutes here and there, they reshape operations in a way that compounds with scale. The payoff is that Logic Apps don't lock you into a narrow toolset. They grow with the business. Start small, saving a handful of hours each week on simple flows, then expand into mission-critical automations that span business ecosystems. That trajectory means Logic Apps meet you at your current stage and are still relevant when your organization matures into highly integrated cloud-first operations. And that's why adopting them now matters. By experimenting today with small wins, you're laying the groundwork for much bigger innovation later. The organizations that start this journey early are the ones positioned to adapt smoothly when new technologies and integrations demand even faster automation. What efficient testing and scaling actually look like. Many automations look flawless in a demo environment. The designer canvas is clean, the logic is simple, and the test file produces exactly the right result. But then reality hits, you push that same automation into production, and within hours it's generating chaos. Suddenly inboxes are overflowing, certain triggers don't fire at all, and support calls pick up. It's not that Logic Apps are unreliable, it's that scale exposes every oversight. What seemed like a minor detail in a small test can become the bottleneck or failure point. Once dozens of users and systems are involved, that's why testing and ongoing monitoring become non-negotiable. The importance of testing isn't glamorous, but it's exactly what protects you from unplanned outages. In smaller use cases, you might get away with skipping it because the risk feels low. In enterprise scenarios, leaving testing out means you're gambling with workflows that entire departments depend on. Missing a single approval may not sound critical, but if the automation is tied to finance or compliance, that miss could delay payments or create audit headaches. Monitoring plays the same role after deployment. It doesn't matter how polished your workflow looks if you have no visibility into whether it's actually running as expected day after day. When testing is ignored, problems surface fast. Flows that try to send emails for every single trigger without any filtering can flood user inboxes in minutes. Conditions that aren't set correctly might activate loops, pumping out duplicate data until someone manually stops the workflow. On the other side, a failure that doesn't get caught can completely silence the automation. From the outside, nothing looks wrong, but your business process is stalled. In some cases, people don't even notice until a deadline is missed. These are the risks you want to catch before rolling out at scale. The first tool for that job is Run History. Logic Apps automatically keep a detailed trail of every execution, including timestamps, inputs, outputs, and error messages. Instead of guessing why something broke, you can step through the flow and see where it failed. Was the trigger not firing? Did the action return an API error? Or did the data simply not match the condition you set? Run History gives you that X-ray view. It sounds simple, but if you've worked with other automation platforms, you know how painful troubleshooting can be without this level of logging. Here it's built in so you can iterate faster and test under realistic conditions. As you move from testing to production, the next step is building resilience through retry policies and error handling. A network call will fail occasionally, that's just a fact. Without retry logic, one bad call might cause the entire automation to stop. With retry policies, the system knows to try again within a certain window before giving up. Error handling is just as critical. If something can't be fixed automatically, you can route that exception to a specific mailbox or system so someone is aware immediately. What you're doing is creating safety nets, preventing silent failures that go unnoticed until they accumulate into backlogs. For larger rollouts, relying only on run history and error alerts isn't enough. That's where Azure Monitor and Application Insights come into play. These tools take oversight to the enterprise level. You can create dashboards to show how often flows run, how long they take, and how often they fail. With alerts configured, you'll be notified before users even notice issues. Imagine catching a spike in failures overnight and fixing it before Monday morning. That's the hidden value, downtime avoided because you had visibility. At scale, avoiding workflow downtime translates directly into cost savings. One scenario illustrates this perfectly. A team once built a workflow to notify project managers whenever a task moved stages in their system. The condition meant to filter duplicates was misconfigured. On paper, everything looked fine, but as soon as multiple tasks moved at once, the automation started sending hundreds of duplicate messages. Project managers were buried in notifications until testing flagged the issue. Because they caught it before wide rollout, the only people impacted were testers, not the entire organization. That's the difference between a controlled error and a damaging outage. The pattern here is clear. Testing and monitoring aren't extra steps. They're core pieces of building with Logic Apps responsibly. Skipping them only shifts the risk, and that risk grows as your automations expand across systems. By embedding testing workflows, applying retry and error handling, and leaning on Azure Monitor, you create structures that make automation reliable instead of fragile. Automation only delivers value when it keeps running consistently, and that consistency comes from discipline, not luck. All of this ties back to the bigger picture. Efficient testing isn't just about fixing today's flow. It builds confidence that the foundation is strong enough to handle future workloads. Once that foundation exists, automation becomes a strategy the business can trust, not a side experiment. That strength is what allows organizations to scale their Logic Apps without fear of them breaking under pressure. Logic Apps aren't here to cut people out of the process. They're here to take the repetition off your plate, so you can focus on the work that actually matters. The approvals, notifications, and routing rules can run themselves while you handle decisions and analysis that no system can replace. If you haven't tried it yet, build one today. Start simple with a file upload notification and see how much smoother collaboration feels. Then think beyond that, integrations across teams, across systems. Automation isn't just about clawing back hours. Used well, it builds a real advantage in a competitive market.